start shortly. Let's see.
Got it. Turn up my volume here. Here we go.
There we go. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Extra Connections. And let's see. It's this little thing here. I'm having all kinds of things today. Yeah, Extra Connections. Extra Connections with James Lott Jr. I'm your host, and I'm here on JLJ Media, my online network, with over 35 shows ranging from all kinds of topics. And so one of my favorite topics is talking about history, television history, movie history. I used to talk to someone who was part of that from the 70s and 80s. I think even some late 60s, but all kind of stuff. We're talking like shows that I watched growing up. That's kind of funny, like Kung Fu, The Waltons. But of course, he was in Little House on the Prairie, which we're going to talk about that, which is what led us together. But also, he's got a very interesting life. And one of the things I want to talk to him about, which I'm going to bring up shortly, is the issue of hoarding. It's about that. So you know about that also. But he's somebody who might give some insight on what went down back in the day. He was also in Red Dawn, which is another movie that I remember seeing in the theater back when it came out. Radames Pera, how you doing?
I'm great. And only a small correction. It's one thing we didn't get to do before, which is talk about my pronunciation of my name. Okay. So just for the record, it's okay. It's a difficult one, so no problem. Yeah. It's Radames.
Radames. Okay, Radames.
There you go. Yeah. But you got the last name. You got the last name right. Radames Para. Thank you.
So wait. So what is that? What is the origin of the name?
Well, thank you. Radames is from the opera Aida, and when Giuseppe Verdi, wrote the opera Aida, he created the name for an Egyptian general who falls in love with Aida, who is a peasant woman, and they have a very ill-fated relationship, meaning that it's kind of like, it's basically Romeo and Juliet. They're from two different tribes, and they fall in love, and in order for them to have the love, they must die. And so that's the opera. And my grandparents on my father's side were the opera buffs, and they named my father Radames, and he named 3 of his children Radames, and only one of them, myself, actually sort of, it stuck with me. So I'm not Radames Jr. because I don't have the same middle name, but essentially I'm the same name as my dad. So Radames Para was my dad, and I'm Radames Para also, from the opera Aida. And it's an Egyptian, it's an Italianized Egyptian name. Giuseppe Verdi, he created the name for the opera.
Well, I love the name Radames. That's a great name. Wait, so you say you have brothers named that too, you said?
I have an older brother who passed away who is named Radames also. My dad was very much into promoting his name.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm like, okay, George Foreman. Okay, I get it.
Exactly. It's very similar to that.
Yes. Well, I'm a junior, as everybody knows, I'm James Lott Jr., so I'm out there. Nobody else after. There's nobody else besides my father and I. But there's some other Jameses in the family and middle name wise. So it's kind of funny. So I hear James. We'll go, yes. It's like, oh, wrong one. So my father's Jim. My father's Jim, but I'm James. But with my grandkids, I'm Papa Jamie.
Oh, how cute.
So they couldn't say whatever. They said, so Jamie came out. So I'm like, okay, so I'm Jamie to the kids.
Right.
So the name, cool. What's in a name?
Well,
okay.
If you were a numerologist, you would say there's a lot in a name, but we're not numerologists here, so it's okay. Go on.
I like numbers. I do like numbers. I'm gonna ask you, so next month is your birthday.
Right. Thank you. I'll be 61. Birthday. 61.
So what does that mean to you? What is 61? What does that mean?
That's a great question. 61 means that I am committed to resolving all the leftover stuff that I have not yet figured out, so that I can have my final chapter be as free and as enlightened and unencumbered with the traumas of my past as much as possible. That's what I'm working toward right now, is to really get over the last hurdle, so that I can, of all the stuff that happened to me that I've been working on all my life, because my whole life has been about personal improvement, and I still have more work to do, and I want to get that last chunk done so I can really kind of go out in a really open, free way. That's my goal.
We're similar that way. I feel the same way. When I turned 40, 13 years, I'm 52. When I turned 40, that was my whole thing. It was like, okay, now I'm at the next chapter. and I want to start clearing out the brush, so to speak.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's, yeah, because I want my, they say the golden years, whatever that means. I just want the later years to be free. I want to be able to just kind of live them. Hopefully, maybe still doing this. I don't know, maybe retire. Who knows what I'm doing by then, right? It's
well,
like
you've got a great thing going on, James, and more power to you. That's all I can say.
Bravo. Yeah. Thank you. No, I have a lot of fun. But I want it to be mentally free, so I can be a creative and not be so tortured, or not be, or self-sabotage. I mean, we do something like that. And you come, but you come from an interesting family dynamic, which we'll talk about in a second too. But you also come from Hollywood. You worked in Hollywood during a time period where they weren't always protecting the child stars. They weren't always politically correct. They weren't always careful. Why do you think you survived? I've interviewed so many different child stars at that time, like Todd Bridges, a few others who survived also. Like, why do you think you survived?
Well, I'm grateful to my mom for giving me. She was very. My mom, bless her heart, was emotionally unprepared to be a parent, but she had one thing that she knew she could put in my hand, which would help me if I would only look in my hand and see it there, which is a compass. She gave me a compass. The compass pointed toward true north. And as long as I knew where that true north was with that compass that she put in my hand, that she felt, and it's true, that I would be okay. I followed that true north as best I could throughout my life. Everything else, I don't think she really could do more than that. And that was enough to give me the inner guidance that I needed to move in the right direction, albeit slowly and with many pitfalls. But I always knew where north was. And so when things got bad and times were tough and I fell down and hurt myself, I could always get up and go, north is that way. I'm going to go that way. And that's kind of how it worked out for me.
It sounds like to me that you learned at some point, which we all have to do sometimes with our parents. They're human. They're our parents. So you're born, when you're born, I think, in my case, you're born with them on a pedestal already, your parents, so to speak. They just kind of like you don't know who they are. You learn who they are as you're going through childhood. But at first, it's like they're your parents. You want food and love and all these things. But it sounds to me that you, like I did too, I had to meet my parents where they're at. And I realized they're people. Is that something that you feel like there's something similar for you too? Like you were able to go, okay, I understand my mom's my mom. But
that took me a while. One of the things that I realized in my probably my late teens was, you go through a phase where you go, my parents are hypocrites, they're telling me this one thing and they're doing something completely different.
Yes.
I went through the phase where I went, you're a freaking hypocrite, how can you,
Yes.
why should I believe anything you tell me,
Yes.
So I went through that. I went through a period where I didn't talk to my mom for a long time, 10 years, which had to do with the fact that she spent all the money I made as a child actor. When I turned 18, I said, hey, Mom, let's talk about my trust fund. Where is that? She goes, we'll talk about that when you're 21. Okay. I'm like, okay. So I went to New York and studied acting for 3 years and I came back at 21. I said, okay, Mom, let's settle up here. You got a trust fund thing. You got to, let's make this right. And she's like, well, son, I spent all the money and, hey, I drove you to all the interviews and I had to be on the set with you every day. And, so I think that was fair trade. I'm like, well, that's not exactly legal what you did. No. And so, I really hate to do this, but because of the fact that you also stole a bunch of money from my family, her parents, to renovate the house, she took money from them in exchange for them coming to live with her. And then when she got the money and renovated the house that I grew up in, she said to her mom and her brother, yeah, I appreciate your helping me work on the house, but I don't really feel comfortable with you guys living with me. And I was like, okay, you know what, Mom? You can't do that to me, to other family members. That's wrong. Yeah. So I actually I actually sued her, and I had a Screen Actors Guild, SAG, was legal department said, you've got a good case here and we'll back you up, but it's your case, but we're with you. And so I did that. And I actually only asked for a paltry fraction of what was actually owed to me as a symbolic number, which had to do with the amount that the house that I grew up in cost. I said, I just want that much money so I can start my own life. And she said, no, she offered half of that to me, which was like 25,000. And I said, okay, look, if this is where you are, this is after 4 years of litigation and what do you call it, depositions and stuff.
Yes.
And I said, you know what? Okay, you're not getting the point, which is I want to have a power balance. I want to establish a balance of power with you, and you can't do this to your family. Well, she didn't get the message, so I took the 25,000. I paid some medical bills that my wife had at the time, and she stipulated we don't talk to each other ever again. And my settlement issue was, let's go to family therapy and let's work this out. And she said, no, don't talk to me again. I'm like, okay. So 10 years I didn't talk to her. So after 10 years went by and my respecting her wishes, I finally had a need. I needed her help to buy my first house because I thought I had enough money, and the person, very dear family friend who wanted to help me buy my house, passed away just before he wrote the check to me.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. And I was in escrow. I was already in escrow. And so I said, oh my God, I have no other choice but to call my mom. And so after 10 years, she actually heard in my voice that I didn't have any need to rake her over the coals or anything. I had done a lot of work in those 10 years about our relationship. And she realized that that I just needed her help. And she, probably out of some sense of guilt or whatever, stepped up and helped me buy my first house. So, God bless her. She did that, and that allowed us to begin a relationship again. So sort of the long answer to your question here is basically in those years that we started talking again, we were able to resolve a lot of things that we had left unresolved, and it was not difficult. And we ended up having a wonderful relationship for the last years of her life. So
yeah, no, that's fascinating. I see this. I was like, wow. I'm like, what?
yeah.
But and I didn't even know all that stuff. I was going to bring up because in my other job that I do, and maybe people know, I'm a professional organizer. Super Organizer LLC, 13 years been doing it. So I concurrently I have one media company and I have an organizing company. I do both. I have a show I would call the Super Organizer Show for the last 6 years, 300 episodes of that. And but I came across on your channel, so this is not a secret, nothing. It was on his channel from about 11 years ago, 12 years ago, a little longer than that, 12 years ago, where you showcase your mother at her hoarding issue, hoarding disorder, hoarding addiction, whatever you want to call it. There's different names for it now, obviously from back then, but you showcase that, and I work in that. I know I have a parent who also is a hoarder, as I understand. It feels like, what did you learn about yourself though, while you were documenting? It was like 45 minutes, right? But while you were there documenting that, it's kind of like and living with that a little bit. What did you learn about yourself?
Wow, what a lovely question. Thank you so much. First of all, it took the love that I had for my mom. My mom had a very traumatic childhood. She was born into World War II. Her parents were running from Stalin into the arms of the Nazis.
Oh.
And they were in camps when my mom was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. She was alone in these camps while her parents were forced into hard labor. They weren't Jews, so they weren't killed. They were in hard labor. So, but it was torture, obviously, and she was by herself. So she had a horrible, horrible childhood. She had a lot of abuses that I don't need to go into the details of, but anything you can imagine happened to her. And out of World War II, she ended up being they fled from the Polish sector after the war ended, from the Polish sector to the American sector, where life was considerably better. They heard that it was better in the American sector of Germany. And in Bavaria in 1945, she experienced her first real childhood, not the torture and the trauma, but picking cherries from trees and eating chocolate and talking English with American soldiers. That's where they spent 3 years after the war, before they were then transferred to the U.S. and given jobs in an apartment in east side of Manhattan. That's how she started her life in America. So, considering all that that happened to her, it's amazing that she actually was able to lead a functional life. Well, in a limited way. She embraced American culture. She went to the High School of Performing Arts. She became an actress and a model. And she met my dad when she was 19. A year later, she had me. And then 3 years later, she moved to LA, to Hollywood, to be an actress with me under her arm and her husband out of the picture. So he left us, just the two of us, and she then was saddled with a child while trying to pursue a career in Hollywood. So very tough. And all those traumas that she experienced, she never quite got the help that she needed. So it all kind of got pushed under the rug, if you will.
Yes.
And so here she was, an ingenue, blonde, beautiful, exotic, Russian, beautiful woman. And she was, the parts that were available for her were, sexy blonde, blah, blah, blah. And her sexuality was actually not very authentic because of all the trauma. So she pretended to be this blonde bombshell, when in fact it was not very authentic. And some people figured that out, and that's why she didn't get very much casting for genuine sexual, mama roles. She ended up doing a lot of character work, which was great. She was a very good actress, so she could do all kinds of different accents, and and that's where she found her niche. And then when I started acting in 1968, her career, she kind of took a back seat. She, oh, good, the kid's working now. Let him earn the money. I've done enough.
Yes.
But then after I worked for 15, 20 years and I left home, then she actually had a second act as a character actress. And she had a fantastic time doing great work by another name, Lisa Vinichenko. And she did a lot of commercials and Tracy Ullman Show, Columbo. She did a lot of great things. And she was so happy. She felt very fulfilled in her second act, where she didn't have to worry about her weight or her looks, and just her talent shined forth. But to address your question directly, so for me, once I understood who she was, and I had come to that understanding before I dealt with hoarding, for me, it was an act of love. It was an act of helping my mom, because she couldn't deal with this. She had filled up her house with stuff, and she basically pushed herself out of the house. She couldn't even live in the house that I grew up in, which she lived in for 43 years. And there was no room for her left. So she checked into a hotel, a motel. And that's where she lived for several months, while I then came to help her out with the hoarding, which involved massive amounts of work to get, because she didn't just collect a bunch of newspapers. She collected a lot of interesting things. And also some things were valuable, some things were not. And they were all mixed together. So sorting that out was a major effort. And my ex-wife and I both worked very hard for 7 months to get the house emptied out and ready for sale. And the reward for that was I couldn't keep the house. And I had to sell the house in order to achieve her future security. And so we did that. And the first person who saw the house, who then made a full price offer on it, was none other than a wonderful character actor himself, Walton Goggins.
Yes, I love him. Folks we know from The Shield, we know him from oh my God,
The Shield,
The Unicorn, which was always on CBS for the last couple of years. Unicorn. He was on Justified.
The Elephant series. Justified. Yeah, he was so great in Justified. Oh my God! And then he's worked in 2 Quentin Tarantino films. He starred in them. So he's a great actor and an incredibly super cool person. And him and his wife bought the house, and they told me, Radames, you have an open door policy here. You can come and pick oranges and lemons from the trees that you and your grandfather planted in the late 60s anytime you want. And he made good on that. I visited him several times. He bought a painting of my dad's, which was always in the house. He said, this painting belongs in this house, and we're going to buy it from you so we can keep it. Coolest person on the planet. Walton Goggins is a great guy. So anyway, I was very fortunate. Yeah, I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
He bought the house. He lived there for 11 years, and they thought they were going to spend the rest of their lives there. They just sold it last year. They made a massive profit on it. Bravo to them.
I'm sure. In LA, yes, I'm sure.
And now they live in New York, in upstate New York, which they did for the sake of their son and for themselves. They had spent all their lives in LA. And as anybody who spends a lot of years in LA, you know, if you're lucky enough, you get out at some point to find out that life exists outside of LA.
It doesn't, Radames. It doesn't. What are you talking about? I left for 22 years and came back, so I know. I left for a while.
Exactly. Yeah. So they did that finally, and you know, they apologized and they said, "We're sorry about missing. We told you we were going to stay in this house forever, but we have to go." I said, "I totally get it. It's okay." Yeah. But they did wonderful improvements to the place, and so my mom's vision of what she wanted to have with the house was actually achieved by the people who bought it. They beautifully renovated it. They honored the architecture and the style of the house. They preserved it, and then they sold it to other people who also appreciate the house. So it's a great house in Hollywood in the foothills on Franklin Avenue, and they did a wonderful job. I'm very grateful to them. For me, helping my mom was a fulfillment of my commitment to her, for her doing her best to raise me. You know, it was a very imperfect job that she did, but I don't have anything against her. She did the best she could, and once I realized that, then my job was to do the best I could to help her transition from a house that she could no longer maintain into a place that she could maintain. And I'm very proud of the fact that I did that. She was very happy in the last few years of her life, and so I feel very good about having honored her by the way I did that. I hope that answers your question. That's a long.
I know. You have great. I mean, like, that's why I love talking to people like you, because you have great stories. Like, who knew Walter Goggins would come up in the conversation? So I'm like, I love it. I do. I love it. This is why I do this. So I love that. So that's good.
All right.
So yay, mom. So she's doing good. So
James, let me just tell you something. I'm having a great time. You're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you. My pleasure. So Radames, you said great name. It's about the acting stuff. You say you started in 1968, a year before I was born. I say that.
Say what?
I was born the next year. It was kind of funny.
Oh, okay.
I was like 1968. I was born in 1969. But okay, so I want to talk about one of the first major roles you had was on Kung Fu. I watched it growing up. I mean, my father watched it. I remember watching it growing up. I don't know if that concept would work today, because I mean, there's so many different things going on now in terms of representation and stuff. But I'm just wondering, for you as a kid, that was your first kind of hit show. It was a hit show. It was a big hit show. And Kung Fu. Did you get into the whole martial arts thing when you were because you were a kid playing a kid? Did you get into that when you were doing the show?
Another great question, James. Thank you. Let me say that my mother was into Eastern philosophy since I was 3 years old. She studied something called theosophy, which is a very esoteric, sort of old-fashioned form of spirituality and metaphysics, but it actually included a lot of Oriental, Asian philosophy, Buddhism, Hinduism, and I was exposed to that at a very early age. So when I got the chance to do the series, I had already done a lot of guest starring roles. Night Gallery, narrated by Orson Welles, I mean, so I had a pretty good career path going, which I think is one of the reasons why I got cast in that. And the other reason is also because I was not unfamiliar with the concepts that were in the show. So though I only studied some of the martial arts aspects for a short while during the filming of the show, for things I needed to do in the show, I didn't maintain that very long after the show. I instead, years later, took up yoga, which I think is a wonderful practice, but not martial arts. Even though I respect people who do martial arts, it's awesome. I feel like I kind of dropped the ball because there's so many people who are fans of the show who would expect me to do that, but I don't do it. So I'm not a hypocrite because I don't pretend to be a martial artist, But I have taken to heart the philosophy. I consider myself not a formal practicing Buddhist, but I think that the ideas espoused by Buddha and Krishna have a lot of merit, and those things speak to me very strongly, and they have for most of my life, and so I feel kind of grounded in that philosophy. I think that answers your question. I want to keep talking because I want you to ask more great questions.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. No, that's good. So back, this is the early to mid 70s. So I want to find out kind of a landscape for you. I've talked to other stars in that time period, kid stars in that time period. I want to find out for you your scope. So did you know the other kid actors? Like when you went to auditions, I'm sure you saw many of those kid actors of that time period in auditions, didn't you?
Yeah. I remember being on a few interviews with Danny Bonaducci, for example.
Hey.
And I was always wondering, are we up for the same role? Is he reading for the same part that I'm reading? Hilarious. How is that possible?
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I also worked on Kung Fu in the first season. I was very fortunate that Jodie Foster did an episode of Kung Fu, and we got to spend a week together, and then we ended up sort of hanging out a little bit or seeing each other in other places with her mom and her sister. And Jodie is an amazing human being. And we did a charity event together at the I can't remember the center, the deaf for the deaf. Gosh, I can't remember the name of who established the foundation. But anyway, we did a benefit for them at one point. Jodie is an amazing human being, and she was back then. She still is, and I felt it was great. I mean, listen, I was on that show by myself. I was the only kid. So when there was another child who was in an episode, it was like, wow, I get to be with another kid for a few days.
So what's that like in terms of your acting? Were you intimidated by all the adult actors? Did it make you feel comfortable? Like, how was that for you, the only kid on set?
Actually, that's a great question. No, actually, when you're a professional actor, as a kid, you are made to feel, and you are essentially a contemporary of anybody else working at the time. So you don't feel like you're a kid per se. However, it can be a lonely experience because adults don't typically banter with kids, so you're sort of left to yourself on one hand. But when you're on a set and when you're doing the work, you are on par with everybody else who's doing the work, whether they're off camera or in front of the camera. So, it was a great experience. And but when there was another kid involved, like Jodie, it was a pleasure, to be there. And let me also tie in something interesting for you.
Please do. Please tie it in.
Yes. When Walton went to sell his house recently.
Yes.
When you sell a house, you have to sort of disappear while the agent brings the potential buyer to the house. You're not there. The occupant is usually gone. Well, 3 visits, and then a 4th visit was requested by this potential buyer. And the 4th visit was to visit with the owners, with Walton and his wife. And that person happened to be Jodie Foster and her wife. They loved the house. And when they finally met with Nadia and Walton, they said, so, in conversation, because they really got along really well. They said, so who lived here before you guys bought it? And Walton said, oh, it's Radames Para. She said, Radames Para? Oh my God, we worked on Kung Fu,
That's so funny.
She didn't buy the house because it was not quite isolated from the street enough. It was a little bit too much. The garage was not behind a security barrier. The garage was on the street, and she would have to get out of her car, be exposed on the street before she could go to behind a gate and be safe. So she opted not for it, but she loved the house, and it's an amazing house. But Walton and Nadia and Jodie and her wife actually got along so well that they actually formed a friendship after that, even though they didn't buy the house. So just a little tie-in.
That's a little tie-in.
Which, by the way, for anybody who may be watching this, can I segue into something to just sort of promote something?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so 2022, in fact, 2/22/22, February 22nd, is the, in fact, 50th anniversary of the Kung Fu pilot airing on ABC television. And I am trying to organize, not for necessarily for that particular date, but sometime next year, I would like to do a 50th anniversary celebration.
Yeah.
I really, and so I've got Keith Carradine and Bobby Carradine committed to appearing.
Wow. Okay, great.
Yes, I am trying. I'm close to getting Jodie to at least be apprised of the opportunity to participate on the panel, because her episode called Alethea was one of the best episodes. It was directed by John Badham, who went on to do a lot of feature films.
Yes.
And he did an incredible job, and she was amazing in the episode. So, you know, if I can get her on the panel, oh my gosh, then I'll be able to get Bill Shatner and maybe, Quentin Tarantino, perhaps. You know, Quentin owns 2 theaters in LA, 2 movie theaters now, and I want him to dedicate a day at one of his theaters for the Kung Fu 50th anniversary. Hey, Quentin, come on, man, come on.
Yeah, he owns the Beverly. Does he own Beverly Theater?
He owns the New Beverly, and he also owns the Vista Theater now. Yeah. So. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on. It's a slow process. I'm the only surviving member of the cast member of the show, regular cast member.
Oh, it's crazy.
So the torch is in my hand, and I'm trying to carry that forward. I know there's a lot of people out there who love the show as you do, who would probably totally be into coming to an event like that, which will have panels and autograph sessions and stuff. So, but I'm a neophyte when it comes to organizing things. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I need other people's help, and I'm trying to put that together now. So Danelle Dadigan, who is the president and owner of the Hollywood Museum, she's a friend of mine, and she has offered to give me a hand as much as I can. I've got a publicist, Harlan Ball, who is amazing.
Yes, we know Harlan.
You know Harlan, yeah, he's great. Harlan is great. So you know, in this sort of like I said, inexperienced way, I'm trying to get this all together. So thank you for letting me share that, and
no problem.
I'll let you know how it goes, and you can give a plug later for it.
Time just goes by so fast. Again,
are we done?
No, not us. I meant time at 50 years. We're not done yet. No, we got more. We got more. No, the thing for me is, you know, like I said, for me, I work in Hollywood as you do, and most of my counterparts are way younger than I am these days, it seems. So when I mentioned, that's why people really love watching my, because I could talk to the folks like us who've been around a while. Like I was there. So I just say that because I was watching TV when there was 3 channels. There was no cable. There was no remote control. I was remote control for my family. James, turn the knob. Turn the knob. Exactly. I had to do it myself. So I'm saying shows like Kung Fu, which were a staple in our house. It's just and like Little House and Waltz and all, they were all staples in my house. It's funny that now we're talking about these milestone markers. They're 50 years old. They're 49 years old. I mean, I think for me, it was like, where did time go? Like, where did time go? Like, I don't even understand what this means. And so, like, did you ever think, I mean, I know you didn't think this back then, that 50 years later, you talking about the show.
No, of course not. How could one imagine 50 years later? I mean, the Kung Fu legacy is not as profound and as far-reaching as the Little House legacy. But having been on that show too, I've been, not central, but associated with other people who have been on the show for a lot longer than I was. I was only on for 3 years, but I'm friends with Alison Arngrim, who was on for the majority of the show. Michael Landon, the work that he did, he was a workaholic, which has its up and downside.
Yes.
But he created something that obviously resonates with people all over the world, and even in France, where I live, the French are gaga for Little House. I mean, it's a major part of the culture here, and I never understood why until I took a train ride outside of Paris and realized that the majority of France is actually rural farmland.
Oh yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, that makes sense.
Why they love Little House. They identify so much with the trials and tribulations of that family. So. No, I had no idea that Kung Fu would last this long, and I feel very fortunate. I mean, listen, until the new Kung Fu series that is now on television on the CW, until that happened, it was just about memes. It was memes like, grasshopper, you have much to learn, or patience, grasshopper. And I could watch Jon Stewart and other comedians and commercials do little spoofs on Kung Fu, and of course, whenever that happened, I was like, Kung Fu. It exists. It's a cultural meme. It survives.
It survives.
It survives, the show.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool, so I'm grateful that I was a part of something like that. And at the same time, I get to keep my anonymity. I'm not famous, like recognizable face, which allows me to be in public, private in public, so, and yet I am a part of something that's very, very much a part of the culture. And is an icon, and Grasshopper is an icon,
Yes.
even though people who repeat that phrase, Grasshopper, today, who are younger than me, they have no idea where it comes from. It's a free floating meme, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it's a nice thing to have in my back pocket.
Sheree Marshall, I'll ask him that in a second. He has a question for you, so I'll ask him that in a second. But I want to finish up this Kung Fu thing. I want to ask David Carradine, of course. The whole Carradine family, they're all so talented. I mean, they're all singers, songwriters, actors, producers, everything like that. What is one thing, I'm going to ask this question. I don't ever ask anybody this. What is one thing about David that we'd be surprised to know about him? Do you remember from your time with them on the show as a kid?
Oh boy. David Carradine was kind of an enigma of sorts. I think he was always pushing on the boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And he had a love-hate relationship with fame. He was a countercultural character while he was also signed on the dotted line with a multinational corporation. So there's a real contrast there,
Yeah.
Let's see. He was always kind of toying with people. He liked to feel as if he was outside the box, looking inside at other people trapped in the box. And so he played with people a little bit that way. And for example, with me, when I was 12 years old, we had the party that celebrated the success of what was unintentionally the pilot of the show. And when it went to series, they had a celebration at a private residence. And when I arrived there with my mom, he arrived at the same time with Barbara Hershey, and they were carrying a tray of a foil covered tray of brownies. They just made brownies, for the party. I can tell you know where this is going.
I do. I was like, all righty. Yes, it was the 70s.
So, it was 1972. So I had no idea what brownies were. Or I knew what brownies were, but I didn't know what other kind of brownies were. And of course, I ate a brownie at the party. And of course, I snuck back into the kitchen because I love chocolate. I had another brownie. Well, not long after, I found myself out of sorts. And David was there. David sort of gave me the brownie. It wasn't like I snuck the brownie by myself.
Oh, okay.
He gave me the brownie. And I spent the entire night at this house. Fortunately, I found a pinball machine to attach myself to. And I spent the entire night just pinball, because that was the only thing that was like I could relate to the reality of the pinball machine. Every time I looked at people going by, I was like, whoa, let's just keep playing pinball, And
hilarious.
At the end of the evening, I walked back in the kitchen to say goodnight, and he was still there with Barbara in the kitchen. They had gone back to the kitchen, and he said, "Hey, Radames, those brownies you ate?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, those are marijuana brownies." I'm like, "Oh," because my mom was like, "The devil, marijuana, the devil," And I was like, and here was the star of the show telling me that he fed me marijuana brownies, and which of course explained why I had the weird evening that I had. Yes. But it also made me go through 97 changes while I was like, okay, and then I left with my mom. But he relished the moment of telling me, and I thought that was a little weird, in retrospect. I mean, you don't do that to an innocent 12-year-old kid, So that's an example of how he lived. So I don't need to elaborate any more than that. Just to say that that's kind of who he was, and that has its ups and downs too. So he's pushing on the edge all the time, and I think he pushed himself over the edge at one point, which is very tragic. So
very, very much so. So the question asked, and we'll lead into this now. T. Sheree Marshall wants to know, who did you play at Little House on the Prairie? Because it's a very interesting story, though, because you're I say John Jr. or whatever, but it's not that simple because you were adopted on the show. I mean, there's a so explain who you. I want to hear you explain who you played on the,
Okay.
on the Little House.
Well,
on the Prairie.
thanks. That's the first time anybody's ever let me do that. So Patricia Neal, the wonderful actress Patricia Neal, who was in The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yes,
okay?
I know. And in HUD and all these movies. She was somebody. She's somebody. She's somebody.
She is somebody. She is somebody. She had just overcome her stroke and how to talk and how to act. And there she was, cast as my mom, and I got to be her oldest son. So the part one of the two-parter called Remember Me, part one, was her letting her three children know she was a widow, and she was letting her three children know that she was not going to be around much longer. And this part two was after she passes away, and Victor French, who played Mr. Edwards on the show, Michael Landon's best friend, and his girlfriend, played by Bonnie Bartlett, Grace, character is Grace. The two of them were trying to find homes for all three kids. And one person who came forward wanted to adopt the two sons to help work the farm. And another woman came forward, wanted to take the girl, our little sister, and take her to the big city and give her an education and a life, that she could never have any other way. Well, Victor French's character, Mr. Edwards, he could not handle breaking up the family. And he had come to love these three children. So he decided finally to propose to his girlfriend, Grace, Bonnie Bartlett, and so they could adopt the three children. And that established I was John Sanderson, then I became John Sanderson Edwards on the show. And then the rest is history, where I proposed, I relationship with Mary Ingalls, which Michael Landon wrote into the show. He liked my character, who's a writer and a poet, and he created this wonderful storyline for John Jr. To become the betrothed to his oldest daughter, Mary Ingalls. However, sadly, despite my best professional efforts to establish a cordial professional relationship with Melissa Sue Anderson at the time, who was 2 years younger than me, and was probably a little freaked out that Michael Landon had written a romantic role for her. And she wasn't ready to have that in her life. And she was very resistant to that. So I became representative of something that she didn't want. And consequently, we didn't get along. Like I said, despite my best efforts to try to, go to lunch with her mom and just get to know her better so we could have better rapport on screen. Well, she didn't participate in that professionally. And we did not consequently get along. And so Michael Landon got wind of that finally, and he realized, okay, the chemistry here is not working. So I've got to write this guy out of the show. Would have been great if he could marry my daughter, but obviously he can't. So they wrote a special episode. He wrote an episode, which he directed, which was the most expensive episode they'd ever shot at the time. Oh, wow. They used the old Hello Dolly sets at Fox Studios, which involved elevated trains and all kinds of incredible stuff that they did, dressing with horses and costumes, to have Mary Ingalls come to Chicago, where I am now attending university, and find out that I've been two-timing her. I've been writing love letters back to her, but I'm actually dating this society girl at the same time. And Michael sees that happening, and he confronts me, and he says, "You better tell my daughter what's up," And so that's how he planned to get the audience uninterested in my character, which was totally actually against character for who John Jr. was. Right. But he had to do that, and they got lots of letters from people saying, "Why, NBC, why did you do this with John Jr.? This is not who he was. This is wrong." Right. And so, but that's how it had to be. And so that's how I love this series.
What did that teach you about Hollywood? About production? That's your first little number there. You're like, okay.
Exactly. Well, yeah. That was the first real nail in the coffin, as they say. Yes. The second one was when the producer of Kung Fu, Jerry Thorpe, who was a wonderful director and great to work with, he went on to do many other TV shows. And one of them he was doing when I was about 22 years old. I met with him and I said, "Look, thank you for having lunch with me, Jerry. look, I've been making films since I was doing Kung Fu. So for 10 years, I've been making my own films, Super 8 and 16 millimeter films. I went to college to study filmmaking. I really want a chance to direct. Will you please give me a chance to direct? And he said, Radames, he goes, I'm in production on a show right now. It's in the first season. If it gets renewed for a second season, call me back in a year. Let's meet, and I will give you a chance. And I said,
Wow.
Jerry, thank you, man. That's what I need. I really appreciate that. So I waited for a year. Yes, the show got renewed. I called him up. I said, Jerry, hi, it's Radames here. You asked me to give you a call back when the show was in the second season. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, you said that, you would maybe give me an opportunity to direct or something. He said, I never said that. How dare you call me? How dare you call me and say these things to me? I'm like, please don't call me again. Click. I'm like, oh, okay. Wow, that was brutal. I did not have the chutzpah to call him back and go, dude, you promised me. I just instead took it inside. It hurt. I let it hurt me.
I'm sure.
Which is my fault. That's my fault. That's all on me.
But yeah, but still.
But it was very painful. And that was kind of like the beginning of the end of my belief in parlaying my acting career into a directing career. That's what I hoped would happen.
Yeah.
And I kind of slowly gave up on that. And when the ball didn't roll much further than that after Red Dawn in 1985, I just kind of went, I don't want to keep beating my head against the wall. And I found myself in the same position that 99.9% of all child actors reach that wall, and they have to realize that it's not in your cards to keep going with this. So I had to do something else. And I pursued another interest of mine that I loved doing, which was electronics and stuff. And I ended up in 1988 starting my own business called All Systems Go, designing home theaters and sound systems. And as soon as I started doing that, it took off. And I ended up doing. In 1988 was the beginning of surround sound.
Yes, yes.
I ended up doing 3 homes for Johnny Depp, 2 homes for Nicolas Cage, Robert Downey Jr.'s house, Sharon Stone's house, Dwight Yoakam, Ben Stiller, Chuck Norris, Charlize Theron. Wow. So I ended up doing a lot of work for people, and I didn't seek that out. It came to me. So clearly, I was doing the right thing, and I had an opportunity with Johnny and with Nicholas, who I had to dinner at my home at one point, to realize, to understand what my life might have been like if my career path had continued the way I wanted. I think I dodged a bullet, quite frankly, because these people, all wonderful, lovely people in their own right, had shredders on every wastebasket in their house, had cameras pointed out the front door. They had no privacy. And I went, wow, that's a lot to give up to be a star,
That is.
And so, here I am today with my anonymity in a certain way, other than what you have taken away from my anonymity.
Yes,
thank you, James.
Exactly. Then we walk down the street no more. Can't go. Well, you're in France, so
I'm going to turn off my screen now.
I'll say, come back to LA. You can't go to Ralph's. No more Ralph's for you. No more pavilions for you.
What? Say that again. I'm sorry. What?
No more pavilions or Ralph's or Vaughn's here in LA. The grocery stores. I'll say.
Oh, you mean I can't go in there? Yeah. No, I can go in there, which is great. So no, yeah, exactly. So it's a huge sacrifice to make for fame, and I've had a good life, so I have no complaints. And to be able to be here with you now, all these years later, my God, clearly. Well, I shouldn't say clearly. I have no ego about it. It's just that it's nice to be recognized and asked about my former past and about my future.
Yeah.
Again, I'm very grateful to you.
Because the thing is, okay, so, you were part of this machine for a while where you were, auditioning, getting roles, auditioning, not getting roles, auditioning, getting a role, getting a guest role, getting this. I mean, you've done a lot of different movies, TV shows, TV series, TV movies. You did a bunch of stuff, regular movies, just all throughout the career. So was it as easy to walk away and start your own business, even though it's ironically in theater surrounds, it's kind of sound and everything, but still, which is still kind of related on some level, but not. Was it like 5 years later you're going, God, I miss acting, or was it just like, if this is my new life, I'm actually good?
Right. Great question again. Thank you. Having been for 20 years in a business where I could not effectively create my career, it was incumbent on my agent, manager, casting director, casting assistant, producer, director to be able to have a job. To go from that to creating something with my own two hands, which hard work, and at the end of the day, coming home with a check for my hard work that I created myself, that was a revelation to me, to be able to do that after the acting career, which was so many people between me and gainful employment, to then create that myself. I loved it. I loved it. And I thought, wow, I can do this for 10 years, no problem. I ended up doing it for 27 years. Wasn't expecting it to last that long. But it made me not miss the path. It really gave me a lot of fulfillment, and I needed that. I really, really needed that at the time, to be in control of my own destiny, because Hollywood does not, until you're a big star, you have no control over your destiny. You're at the whim of everybody else. So, but years later, after doing that for 27 years and kind of leaving that behind, that's long enough to do something. I have re-entered. I have one of my irons in the fire is acting again. So I have an agent in London and an agent in LA. And in fact, just this morning, I actually uploaded a scene for a Russian mob leader, 1994 New York Russian mobster, mob boss, which is I love the bad guy roles. They're great. And I am doing that again. I have started to do some more acting. I haven't gotten a role yet, a paying job, but it's coming. It's coming. And I'm doing it on a completely different level now. I don't have the attachment, the desperation that I had in my 20s, So it's an easy thing for me to do now, and I love it. And if something happens, great. It means I'll get some extra income and maybe parlay that into something. Who knows? But I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful for the fact that there's two agents, one in London and one in LA, who values my work enough to believe in me to submit me for roles today. So how lucky am I? It's great. So
I think it's very interesting, almost kind of parallel to your mom. Now you're going back to the business again later, and basically a character actor.
Right.
How interesting is that? It's like it's almost kind of a parallel thing going on there. Take a little break.
That's true. Exactly. That's right. That's a very good observation. I never connected that. Thank you so much, James.
Bring that awesome. Around. Like you did earlier. I know how to do this. Radames. No, but I mean,
that's awesome.
But I think it's very interesting that I always say there's no coincidence, obviously, in life. But I think it's very interesting that that's kind of your thing too. You went away for a while, like she did what you had to do, whatever you're doing, and now you're coming back in. And for you, it sounds to me you come back in, and I know how it feels. I came into the business older, also. It's not as frantic. It's not as urgent. It's not as high strung.
You have the perspective of having lived life, just you do, I do. And yes, you can approach it from a completely different point of view. And in fact, it's actually much healthier. And also, I think too, because there is not the desperation, I think that appeals to casting people. In fact, one of the secrets that they used to tell you when you were a young actor is don't be desperate, pretend like you don't need the job, and then they'll want you. And so, now that's occurring for me naturally. And of course, I hope something happens. But I'm not.
Radames, it has to, because now there's more options. And let's talk about it for a second. Back then, not until like
3 channels.
Yes, 3 channels, but also there were studios. There were major studios that had a monopoly on everything, and there was also movie studios. Only a few too. There's like 5 or 6 that they were the major ones, and that's it. Nowadays, we have streaming. I produce audio dramas. So I have audio dramas that are happening. Yeah, I write them, produce them, direct them. I have people who act to them. I do that.
Wow.
But that's an avenue now too. The audio world's an avenue for acting. Of course, YouTube. Just all these things are happening now. And then the networks and cable. There's a lot going on. Amazon. Hulu, all these Peacock.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
There's so much going on that there's plenty of work for everybody. So that's why I'm optimistic, though not attached to the possibility that there's a good possibility that I'll get some work at some point. You know, if my agents keep finding stuff for me to submit to. And this whole thing now, you know, you used to have to drive halfway across town to show up on time for an interview. You know, and be given the script and just sort of read off cold readings off the script. Now you get to work on a part, you get to refine it before you push the record button on your camera, and get to do some, you know, some self-taping. Self-taping is a great thing. You know,
I was gonna ask you, do you like it? I mean, some folks don't like it. Do you like it?
Well, it's not my favorite thing. I actually was used to coming into a room and reading in front of people. That was what I did. So yes, this is new for me, but because I have filmmaking skills, it's easy for me to run a camera and lighting and edit stuff, you know, which I enjoy doing too. So and it allows me to do it from my extremely remote location in the middle of France. Yes. So I'm grateful for that too. For sure.
Wait, so you're a person, because one of my other friends, she's over in London. She's outside of London, and she's still an actress. She's been an actress for 20, 30 years. She did a lot of daytime soap operas. But her thing was like, she's like, yeah, I'll fly back to LA if a good role comes. I'll come to LA or New York or Atlanta or wherever. If it's a good role, or they sort of fly to Spain or whatever. Like, if it's a good role, it's a good role. I'll take it at this point in your life. So I figure you're the same way. You're like, if it's a good role, they want to pay me, I'll go over here and do it.
You know what? Even if it's not a good role, because I'll tell you something, my wonderful acting teacher, who Stella Adler. She was one of the greats. And by the way, I was just telling somebody else today in conversation, who was in my class with me was none other than Judd Nelson and Christoph Waltz.
Oh, wow.
And I actually had the opportunity to meet Christoph Waltz about 6 years ago. And without realizing that he was in my class, I told him that I gave him a compliment. We were at dinner, my wife and I were at dinner, and he was sitting right next to us. And at one point, after respecting his privacy for a long time, I finally had a moment where I met eyes with him, and I said, my wife and I are great fans of, appreciators of your work. Your courage and your creativity of your choices is so amazing. He goes, oh, how lovely. So thank you for that compliment. I said, I guess yes, my acting teacher said, you know, that courage and imagination is the key to acting. He said, oh, then who was your acting teacher? I said, well, I studied with Stella Adler. He goes, I studied with Stella Adler too. Yes, I said I was there in 1980, between 1978 and 81. He goes, I was there between 78 and 81.
Wow.
Oh my God. He thought he was being punked. It was like such a coincidence.
Yeah, I'm sure, you know, totally crazy.
And then after the fact, I remembered he's the German guy who Stella was saying, honey, unless you can work on your accent, you're never going to have a career in America. And so he did. He worked on his accent, and of course now he's a major star. So we were in class together. Why did I segue to that from? You were asking me about. Oh gosh, can you rephrase your question?
It's just the whole thing is just very interesting that, you know, you're coming back into this. You'll go somewhere, whether it's a good job or not a good job. You mentioned.
Oh yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, James. So what Stella said, which is I think one of the greatest things, is that she said there are no small roles. Right. There are only small actors.
Yes. I love that. I love that.
So that's why even if I get, you know, 5 lines, an opportunity to speak 5 lines. You know what? I'm going to give those 5 lines my best because, you know, why be judgmental about whether it's a good opportunity or not? It's all a good opportunity. You know what I'm saying? So not to be critical of your friend. I'm not judging what she said. I'm just saying, you know, there really are no small roles. You know,
I think the basics of what you're saying, what she's saying though, is that you can live anywhere at this point now, right. And if you want to take a role, you can. I think that's the bottom line, right? The bottom line
if they're willing to pay for your ticket to fly where they're shooting, you know.
There you go. There you go.
That's the other option. That's the other thing.
Radames got that. So that's why I think you guys agree on that one too. But I'm saying either way, though, so that life is now. You don't have. Everybody used to say, go to Hollywood for acting, or go to New York, this, or go. You don't really have to anymore. Now it's kind of the world's your oyster. You could actually go anywhere. I mean, but that things are also filmed everywhere. A lot of filming in Vancouver, British Columbia, a lot of filming in Atlanta, a lot of filming in North Carolina, Pittsburgh.
There's a lot of things going on in Hungary and
Yes.
Poland.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Austria. Oh yeah.
Really,
oh yeah.
they have lower cost of labor there, so a lot of productions are doing Eastern Europe because there's very talented people who work for much less than they do in London or LA or Atlanta. So
they do. It's really happening. It's very global what's happening, which is a great thing. But I do sometimes miss the old ways of, we all had to watch when we had to watch. There was no TiVo, there was no DVR, there was no VCR tapes or even Beta. I remember Beta, folks. I remember Beta people out there. I had a Beta machine. There's supposedly Beta was better, but that it didn't.
Beta was better. It's just,
I know.
Sony didn't license it to other manufacturers.
They didn't.
Bad on them.
Promise. Okay, I'm going to tell you something for a second. Okay, I'm an electronic nerd, so all you electronic nerds, sit for a second. I won't go too in the weeds, but I just want to get a little something for him and me. So in 1981, we got one of the first Beta machines in our whole neighborhood. And it was the top loading. So it was this heavy ass thing that was just like heavy. It was a piece of furniture. You sat on top of our giant console TV. That's how old we are. And it was a top loading. You load it, you press it down, and the tapes were this big, little tapes. And I remember we used to tape things off the TV. This was the early days of cable. We had Z Channel and it was
Z Channel. I remember Z Channel.
We had a couple of channels and we used Beta, and we had Beta for a while. And then, like you said, about 2 years, 3 years later, Sony was like, "No, we're going to do VHS." So we got a VHS player, and that was it. I just want to I love my Beta player. I don't have it anymore in my house anywhere, but I love my Beta player. So the tapes, they were little tapes. They're fun. So, but I always heard that they were a better quality than VHS.
They were absolutely better technology. Yeah, it's true.
Technology. So it's kind of funny how that works.
I can acknowledge that.
But I do admit, I do miss some of the appointment television where we all had to watch. It's family got together and watched a show together, like Little House on the Prairie, like. It's happening a little more now. Sometimes with the binge watching, people are you go on Hulu or Cozy TV, and you can find these shows. But like Kung Fu, so we watched Wonder Woman, Body. We watched all those together as a family. We all sat there after dinner and watched them. I miss it.
I miss that too. And the same thing has happened. The fragmentation has happened also with music. When there was FM radio, when everyone listened to FM radio.
Yes.
If there was a hit song, everyone was enjoying that hit song together, or even if it wasn't a hit song, just there was good radio at one time in the 70s, 80s, even in the 90s.
Yeah.
And yes, just as with television, where we all had to stop what we were doing or plan to do something in front of the television at that certain hour, and you knew, even though you weren't totally aware of it, but there was a sense that you were doing this, and you were in fact doing this with millions of other people at the same time,
Yes.
Whether you're on the West Coast or on the East Coast, so 3 hours difference. But in that same day, millions of people were tuned in to that one show, or musically, millions of people were grooving on a certain song, Marvin Gaye, whatever it happened to be. We were all singing that song together. And that cultural cohesion that kind of television experience and that kind of musical experience created is something that we are missing today in this culture. However, with COVID, we all got a chance to experience something together for the first time in a long time,
Exactly.
And also with political issues that have come, through America in the last 4 years or so. There's been some coalescing around certain ideas, which has both good and bad aspects to it. But before that, when it came to music, when it came to art, when it came to communally participating in art, there is nothing more beautiful and amazing than that, and I do miss that too. I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's something that I really enjoyed about my younger years, and it's something that the younger generation has no clue of what that kind of communal experience was about.
No, I think you're right. The 90s probably were the last bit of that. And that was also with the invention of DVD and stuff, but still the family got together and watched TV together, certain shows together. I just remember growing up, it was a thing. It's like you had dinner, where you came home, you got your play clothes, you did your homework, you had dinner, and then there were certain shows we were allowed to watch before we were ready to go to bed. And it was like, okay, then on the weekends we woke up in the morning and had breakfast, and then we watched our cartoons or certain shows we'd watch. I mean, I was an American Bandstand person, and
Saturday morning, you could only watch cartoons on Saturday morning. Now you can watch, my daughter watches cartoons like all day long.
All day long,
like,
right.
Like,
Saturday morning.
That's too much. I don't think that's good.
Right.
Because, well, I think it's not good because it's not what I experienced. It might not be actually bad for her, but it's so different than Saturday morning is a special time where it was your time to turn on the TV. Your parents were asleep or doing something else, and you got to watch TV that was made for you on Saturday morning.
Radames, I did a reference the other day that I felt so ancient that no one else got. I had to rush. I was like, I should read the crowd. Because not only cartoons, there were certain shows like Electric Companies and Sesame Street when it was on just that in the morning, Zoom and all these shows in the late 60s, early 70s. I remember I was a huge Romper Room fan, and Marianne had the mirror, which was not really mirror, and she'd say your name. Well, my name is James. So it's very common that she would say James at some point. And I had brothers and sisters who have names like that, like yours, have just unique names. They never said them. So I was like, ha, she said my name, she didn't say, Adari or whatever, like just said James. But I made a reference to that. People were like, what's that? I'm like, you don't know Romper Room. And I realized they weren't even alive. They weren't even like gleam in their parents' eye when that show was on.
Dude, I go back further. I go back to Captain Kangaroo. Okay. So
I was young, but I remember of him later. But I was young. But I mentioned the whole the Croft and all that stuff, the HR Puffin stuff and the Bugaloo.
Yeah.
They were like, what's that? Like,
that was great.
And
stuff.
I remember Land of the Lost, that movie they made years later. There was a show. That kind of. So I have to read my audience sometimes. Like, you guys don't even understand what I'm talking about.
It's okay. Listen, no, you're letting them know of the history, that there's a context, that what they enjoyed came from something else, and that's why it's important. That's why music is so important, to help young people know that, oh, you think this is original? No, they're actually copying this other person who actually was the originator of that riff. And and it's good to know that DNA, because then you can appreciate more what you're listening to. Yeah, I know. It's hard to convey that to people.
I know. I try, I guess. Well, Radames, I can talk to you forever, but that they'll be like, why are we talking for 5 hours? Oh, let's do this again sometime. You're welcome back on the show anytime.
Thank you so much. It would be a pleasure, as it has been.
We're now friends. We're now friends, folks. We have met. We're now friends. But Radames, so you have a YouTube channel, which I'm following now, subscribed to it. Are you on social media at all?
Well, I've got a couple of sorry, not websites, but Facebook pages. I've got Radames Para. Let's see, it's Radames Para, Little House on the Prairie, Radames Para as John Jr. I think it's Little House on the Prairie, Radames Para as John Jr., which a friend of mine who's first a fan, now is a friend. She runs that website for me. I mean, that Facebook page. I also have Radames Para, and I also have Grasshopper, Radames Para, something with Grasshopper and Kung Fu. So I've got three Facebook pages that people can join, and I try to post things there. It's a lot of work to keep posting things.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of work.
I have enough time to do my own Facebook page with my actual close friends, and then I try to put some time into other things, but I always end up getting behind. But that's one place. I'm writing my own memoirs right now. I'm trying to find a publisher.
Oh, yeah. When that gets published, you got to come back on. You got to come back on.
Publishing. Finding I have to find a literary agent before I can find a publisher.
Right,
that's another thing.
Right.
So that's a overwhelmingly difficult task to do without help. But I have a very interesting story to tell, and I hope that someone will take me up on that at some point, to represent me to a publisher, or a publisher, giving me a chance to. So yeah. What else is going on? Well, the 50th anniversary of Kung Fu, and if I have any acting things that come up, I will let you know. And I wish all the power to you. You are doing a service for people by your wonderful attitude and your great spirit that brings out the best in people like myself. And I feel honored to have been your guest.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm honored to Radames. Thank you for being everybody. Thank you for watching this, or if you're listening to us, thank you for listening to it. We enjoy our listeners. This show is 5 years old. 5 years old, and I'm up for an award for it. And in 2 weeks, I find out if I win or not. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yay! You deserve it. You deserve it, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm nominated for 3 awards. It's award play. So we'll see. This is one of the shows that was nominated for the Capital City Web Award. So we'll see if what happens, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, I have a funny feeling you're going to get something.
Oh my God! People keep saying that. I got nervous.
Listen, I've done not hundreds like you said in the original, but I've done a few interviews, and I can tell you that you are an exception in the way that you make your guests comfortable and you ask really great questions, and you have just a very comfortable, familiar, friendly, supportive attitude, which is like so cool and makes you extremely watchable. And I wish you nothing but continued success.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I actually appreciate that. Thank you very much. And everybody out there, follow JLJ Media. There's a subscribe button here somewhere. I always point the wrong spot. It's a red rectangle. Yeah, it's always point. I'm going, it's over here, James. It's over here. My kids make fun of me. It's down there somewhere. It says subscribe. Hit that button. That's why just hit it. And check out this interview and others. I interviewed Dean Butler too. So talk to the interview I did with.
Oh, isn't Dean great? Dean great?
Oh, the best. I do the best. All the best. He's the one who told me I should talk to you guys. Talk to anybody. I'll talk to anybody. And I did
Allison Arngrim and Dean Butler are like some of the best people you could ever talk to.
I'm interviewing them. I mean, I'm also interviewing Karen Grassel too. So I'm interviewing her also.
Oh, Karen's really neat too. And you know what? You should try to get Charlotte Stewart, who is Miss Beadle. I have a list. They're on the list. She's a very interesting gal as well, and she's a hoot to talk to.
They're all on the list. I have all on the list. I'm working them all. My tentacles are out there. I'm working all of them at the same time. But Extra Connections is on Facebook. Extra Connections is on every streaming platform service you can think of, from iHeartRadio to Spotify to Apple, Google, all of those. It's there. Just hit the follow button right there. Also, share, tell a friend. And everyone, I'm James Lott Jr. You can follow me. We're all James Lott Jr. Sold at James Lott Jr. on all social media platforms and on TikTok. Yes, I'm a TikTok star too, apparently. So I'm there too. Everyone, please be safe, have compassion, and we'll see you next time. And connect to people. Connecting.